Hello and welcome to Reanimated. This is episode 210. My name's Stuart. I'm in California. With me is the unrepentant H.A. Conrad.
True.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
How is the Brooklyn?
Brooklyn is great.
No helicopters this week.
No helicopters, just bagels and delicious, delicious iced coffee.
Today we're going to be talking about half of the Grindhouse double feature released by Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino in 2007, entitled Planet Terror. But before we get to that, we have a little bit of news to talk about.
We saw a little bit of a tidbit of a news story. Basically, the Z Nation zombies, like a lot of the costumes and things like that, are up for sale. It's kind of an interesting little auction, don't you think? If you want to outfit your own movie, maybe.
I like that the Spokesman Review wrote this story too. That it's not like a genre news publication. They're like, hey, you know what's crazy that's going on in our town?
Right.
There's a whole sale of zombies and costumes, I guess, and what's the word for things that go in movies?
Props.
Props. Thank you. In Spokane, which is I guess where the show was made, and so they have a quote from one of the guys who used to play several of the zombies on the show, who's like, I want to buy some of this stuff. Although I guess it's a little sad that they're getting rid of all their stuff, because you're like, well, I guess Black Summer isn't going to be using any of this stuff.
Kind of a cool little story. I agree. I kind of like that it was this funny little local news story. Just like random, but good.
So yeah, that's cool. We've got there's some good pictures, good photos of the gross stuff that they're trying to get rid of in this sale. Also in the news is something that this kind of starts to lean into politics a little bit, but so apparently AMC is saying that they're thinking about leaving Georgia based on the abortion bill. So we will, I guess, find out if that's the case. I mean, they've invested a crazy amount in that area, and so has some of the cast, because they've opened restaurants and started businesses there. Right. Some people have moved there. I think Chandler Riggs moved to Georgia to finish high school. I mean, he's obviously not there anymore, or if he is, he's not there because of the show.
Well, it's not just AMC. It's also, I think, Netflix and Disney are all saying that basically because of the abortion legislation that has made its way through Georgia, that if it gets passed or if it continues, that they are pulling out of Georgia. And the thing is that Georgia has invested an enormous amount of money into getting filmmakers, movie makers. Like they have attracted these companies deliberately to boost their economy. So this would be a massive loss to the economy of Georgia should all these big names pull out. And I kind of think that AMC will do that if this comes to pass, just because if it stands, just because basically if all these names are getting on board, they're just not going to sit by and continue. And so it will be interesting to see how this plays out. I think that some of the legislation, the way that it is worded, is deliberate so that it makes its way to the Supreme Court. So we're going to have to see how this all plays out in the end. But should all these people leave, I think that this would truly hurt the economy in the state. I mean, they've done a bunch of tax breaks. They've done like a multitude of things to attract companies to make these shows, these productions in their state. And they've been quite successful, obviously. So, but I think that probably Walking Dead is the biggest production, perhaps. And certainly the longest running in terms of the number of years. So,
yeah. And it's one of the highest profile based on the fact that they clearly were set there, and they have that little Georgia logo in their credits every week.
And and look, with the extras, they employ an enormous amount of people there too. In addition to the people assisting making the film, there are people that are extras. So I guess we'll have to see how it plays out. But I'm curious. We'll be following this story and see what happens in the end. And is also Fear the Walking Dead shot here, or is that somewhere else?
They're shot in Texas mostly.
Texas, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll keep following the story and report back as it unfolds.
Speaking of things unfolding, do you remember the last Wesley Snipes zombie movie we saw?
Oh gosh, I do not.
It wasn't
What
even
was
a
it?
zombie movie. It was called Gallow Walkers, and it was about like these.
Oh, the weird, that terrible thing that I couldn't
Yeah,
even believe that they made it. It was
it was
very
a
strange.
western and sort of, yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah.
So he's getting back into the genre
Hmm.
with a project called Outbreak Z, an action horror thriller being directed by Daredevil fight choreographer and stunt performer Chris Brewster, which I just don't understand.
That is an odd choice. I mean, maybe he's been doing his own films that we don't know about, and so he's mainly known as a fight choreographer, and he's a pretty good fight choreographer. So, I'm down with some of that, but this doesn't bode well if if we're talking about, I don't know. I shouldn't make judgment calls because we don't know what he's been doing in addition to his fight choreography. But interesting person to choose to lead a project, but we'll see. We'll see
Yeah.
how this goes.
This is early on. This is a story. This is out of the Hollywood Reporter, which
Right.
it gets very, very early, not even half baked projects. So we'll see what happens. And I'll be, no, I'm not even going to be optimistic based on Gallo
Mm.
Walkers. I don't know that I can be.
But again, we'll try to see how that unfolds and report back as we get more information.
HA made me watch Planet Terror this week. Usually it's me making HA watch bad things. And this
Hmm.
time she was like, no, you haven't seen that? You absolutely have to. And I think, yeah, there was a good reason why I didn't watch this movie when it came out.
Yeah, there was, but I think there's some good things about it, definitely. But there's also some super gross things about it. So,
Oh, man.
this was part of a double feature that was a Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez project. This was Robert's half of the project. So basically, they each released a film. This was Rodriguez's baby. And before this, he had done Dusk Till Dawn. I will say that he was like, zombie movies are going to make a big comeback. This was sort of his idea, and he wanted to be like in there and doing this. There was a lot that happened with this film and with the making of it. Many, many challenges. Which we'll touch upon a little bit. There's been a lot in the news in terms of things now that came out in this past year or so. And this is because this ended up being a Weinstein Brothers production, or that film company. And, Rose McGowan is the star of this film. And prior to this had been blacklisted because she alleged that Harvey Weinstein had raped her in 1997. And Robert Rodriguez basically cast her in this, and there's a lot of fallout that came from this. But basically, they both claim that the sort of launching of this film was buried. The release was buried. In fact, it was released on a Good Friday, and it had a pretty massive budget. So, like, there's a pretty big range, 53 to 67 million. But the box office for this was 25.4 million. And I would say releasing,
I think that's for both movies, though. That's for the
is
double
it
feature.
okay?
Yeah, because this one was like 10.
Was the budget for both of them?
Yeah.
There is a lot of controversy that swirls around it. Basically, she came out in the press saying that Robert Rodriguez had used the information about the Weinstein rape to manipulate her in this film, and in fact wrote this whole scene. There is a rape scene, or an attempted rape scene, in the film. He says that was always part of it. There's a lot that was going back and forth in terms of the Me Too movement and things that came out later. I will say that when I first watched this, despite some of the shortcomings of its film, I was surprised that it didn't do better, because it definitely seemed to be kind of right in this niche. It had that kind of pulpy feel. These were both supposed to be exploitation films, and that's exactly what it feels like, just so over the top and pulpy and honestly gross. that and there's a lot that is pretty nasty about some of this film, but more so the other film I found to be awful.
Wait, the
But
other one is worse than this one?
I think so, yes.
Saw those pictures of like male genitals with herpes on them?
Oh,
Were
the
out-
other one is much worse. Obviously there was a massive budget for this, just in terms of the production, just the effects, and it's interesting because it's based upon pulpy grindhouse films, and they're supposed to be bad in some ways because they didn't have the budget, but they had to create that look. So they spent an awful lot of money trying to create that look. So it's kind of interesting, just thinking about it. It had a phenomenal cast.
I love Michael Biehn, man.
I know, man, Michael Biehn. But you know who I love? Parks. Do you know? Is it Michael Parks? There's a father and son duo. He was in Kill Bill as well. He's the sheriff dad
Yeah.
in this.
Okay.
What is his
Earl.
name? Sorry. Yes, yes. And he died a couple years ago, but he actually had such a big comeback in a lot of the Tarantino and Rodriguez films. And in fact, I think in these two movies, he plays this character, and his son, who is also an actor, plays the son of this character. So it's just like kind of, I guess it's a family affair. I don't know. Anyway, in addition to him, you've got, oh, and then we, of course, in this film, we have a nice little bit part with Tom Savini.
It's not a bit part. He has lines. He's on the
I know,
screen for like a good half hour.
He's in it.
It's not as much of a bit part as Dust Till Dawn, which was a bit part where he had that like weird belt buckle pistol.
Right.
I guess actually he kind of came back in that one too. But that was, so him and Rodriguez had a history already by the time it came to this.
Right. And we got Naveen Andrews. We got Fergie. Got so many people in this. And you know, with obviously Rose McGowan being the main, the lead in this, and then playing opposite of her is Freddie Rodriguez,
who is best known from 6 Feet Under. Yeah, I was like, where do I know this guy from?
Yeah, that's where he's from.
Kind of funny.
Yep.
It was weird seeing him cast as this like badass.
Yep. Which is, you know, so anyway, like just an incredible cast. Oh, Bruce Willis. You can't forget Bruce Willis.
Yep.
So
speaking of bit parts, also, he did a little bit of scenery chewing. Not really. All they did was like do real tight zooms on his face. Looking, serious, I guess.
But, you know, let's... So I know that they had this massive cast, and it was a huge undertaking. And during this film, or at some point, Robert Rodriguez and Rose McGowan started having a relationship, and he actually left his wife of many years. I think like they had been married like almost 20 years or something like that. And so it's kind of weird because like his son's in it too.
Yeah.
The kid that plays Tony is Rebel Rodriguez.
Really weird role.
Yeah. And we'll get into that. But do you wanna? I'm curious to hear what your general impressions are overall. Like, I think I get a sense already, but I would like to hear it.
Josh Brolin was in
Josh
this too.
Brolin.
Freaking Thanos, man.
Yeah. And Stacey Ferguson.
I mean, it opens with scenes of like people eating balls. There's just, or at least that's not what it opens. It opens with like go-go dancing. I don't know. Yeah, I wasn't really on board for this. It was not super entertaining. There were parts of it where I wanted to look away from the screen because they were going for the gross outs whenever they would like squish one of those goopy pimples and let the goop go down Josh Brolin's face, for instance, or the pictures of disgusting things on the monitor while that one guy's getting his arm checked out. I felt like there were too many overt, like, serious attempts to make people, like, to just gross people out. Which is, you know, I have this issue when things are like Sharknado, when they're made to be bad,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of turns me off as a viewer. And so this was a movie made in that vein, and I didn't love it for that. I'm talking big picture, I guess. And so the other big picture thing that did not work for me was the editing. And I know that they did this kind of on purpose with the missing reel section.
Mm-hmm.
And the weird artifacting on the screen to make it look like it was actually shot on film instead of digitally. Maybe it was shot on film in 2007, or that was when it was released. But there were some on purpose choppy editing, and then there were some that I think was actually accidental. Specifically, there's a scene where Ray is arrested. He's in the sheriff's office. Then suddenly a fight breaks out outside. Ray, the sheriff, who is Michael Biehn, looks back at the doorway. Ray's there. Then he shoots at some zombies, turns around, Ray's gone. And then there's a cut to a car blowing up, and suddenly Ray's back outside again with the sheriff. And I was like, well, when the missing reel section happens between the second and third acts, I was like, oh, maybe they were just trying to recreate some of that, but I feel like that whole scene, the sheriff outside the firefight outside the sheriff's office, felt to me like extremely choppy and weird editing. And I don't know, do you feel like that was by intention
Yes.
or accidental?
I definitely think that it was used with intention. And
'Cause I felt like it was accidental based on just the way that that scene unfolded.
um, yeah. So yeah, I don't think it was accidental. I think it was on purpose.
I think
And
you're being very forgiving to this film in that respect.
well, I mean, if you've ever seen like the exploitation films that they're trying to sort of bring back, I
Yeah,
mean,
I
they
mean,
did.
I had a real thing for Trauma back in the day. I used to watch those movies, and I feel like they were weird, but they didn't do this sort of thing. Do you ever watch Trauma stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I guess the closest I can come to it. And I read Roger Ebert wrote about this movie, this double feature when it came out. He's like, yeah, men used to go see these films to see boobs and explosions because mainstream stuff wasn't doing that.
Right.
And now mainstream stuff does show boobs and explosions. There's really no need for this. So like Ebert was like, what's the point? And I'm with him on that one, I guess.
Well, I mean, look, this is a bit of what Rodriguez and Tarantino do. They're both huge film buffs. They love like the history of film. They reference all these kinds of things. I think I told you I saw Lady Snowblood in the theater a few months ago when they played it here, and that is actually this film that he yanked almost the entire storyline for Kill Bill from. Tarantino did. So it doesn't. They're trying to do that kind of thing here. I don't know if they completely do it successfully. I think it's supposed to be bad. So if you're not into that kind of thing, then this isn't for you. I think that there are parts of this that are really well done. The grossness of some of it, I am like, ugh. I think the genital grossness of all of it, that stuff was just so nasty. The balls and
That just keeps coming back. That it's like, yeah,
they're
genitals.
really into the balls and the dicks falling off a lot.
Yeah.
And actually, some people say that this is a bit of a nephew to Weinstein, and sort of like this is what happens to people who sexually assault people. I don't know how much that is true or not, but that's what some people say. But I think that there's some really just this is sort of in the vein of what they were doing. It felt really long. I don't know how you felt about it.
Oh
And
yeah.
this is the theatrical release that I watched, and it was like an hour and like
It's
45.
yeah, it's 105 minutes. So yeah.
So so it's incredibly long for what it is, and I definitely think it could have been edited down. I mean, thank goodness there was a missing reel, because otherwise this would be like a
Right?
2-hour movie.
I
Um,
did kind of like the missing reel. In when you look at their description of why they did it, Tarantino I guess did one in Death Proof too. I don't know if
yep.
you remember that. And they're like, yeah, the end of the second act is usually the most boring, most predictable part of the movie. So let's just cut to the third act. I'm like, yeah, dude, that's kind of a cool idea. I wouldn't want to see
Yeah.
it done in every film. But when it was that felt, obviously that was extremely intentional, and it just kind of you get you get past the sex scene with Rose McGowan and Freddie Rodriguez, and suddenly you're like everybody's bleeding more, everything's on fire, and I'm like, yeah, I dig this. This is
Yeah,
cool.
I liked that. I also thought that the sort of tropey storylines were there, just totally over the top. The Josh Brolin character was super evil.
Yeah, he does
Um,
evil well.
he does evil really well. And then Marlee Shelton, who plays opposite of him as Dr.
Dakota.
Dakota Black.
Yeah,
She is, she's also got that whole weird effect where basically her hands are anesthetized, so she's got like no hands to use during. So they have all this weird stuff related to that
that was
issue.
yeah. When Doctor Block, I guess they're both Doctor Blocks. When he stabs her
Is
with
it
the
Block or Black? I thought it was,
block.
is it?
Block.
Okay.
When he
Sorry.
stabs her with the syringe multiple times, it's that's a pretty cool, like, in quotes, cool way to take care of your prey, I guess, from a psycho's perspective.
Hmm.
Even though it was gross, I kind of like the fact that she just, she raised her hand, it would flop over, and
Yep.
it was. I thought that was kind of an interesting element.
Well,
to
and
this.
then just the other thing was even just trying to get a car door open. those car doors because that's like old school car doors. Like that was horrible, but
It was.
well done. And I liked the fact that eventually when she got the use back of her hands, that was obvious that she could now use them. So that was good.
What she used them for was pretty insane. Like,
correct.
Suddenly she's like a gunslinger with syringes.
Right. But the weird part of their particular story is their kid. So, and this, I mean, I have to say, even when this is 2007 when this came out, this did just, I was really kind of shocked that they did this, but they have a kid, Tony, who is played by Robert Rodriguez's son, Rebel. And basically, it's like a don't play with guns moral of the story, I guess, but like they have this whole thing where she hands him a gun from the glove box, says don't point it at yourself, and he does, and he kills himself. And apparently there is an alternative version where that does not happen, and in fact at the end of the credits, like after the credits, there's a scene with Tony Block playing on the beach with his weird little creepy pets, the turtle, the scorpion, and the tarantula. There was an alternative version where he is alive during the whole film. But man, to do that with your own, even just, I don't know, what did you think about that?
Yeah, that's some dark stuff to put your kid through, to put yourself through. I mean, maybe, Rodriguez is able to just distance himself from it because he's like, oh, it's all movie magic. But even to think about.
Well, it's to think about also he's on set, so all that weird stuff is going on set, obviously. So there's that in addition that I can't help think about but when I'm watching this. And even though there's an alternate version, the kid still had to go through the other version, so he knows, like, right? So unless they just didn't even have him on set and he didn't know about it, that's the only thing I could think of.
When Dakota is running inside with him, I'm pretty sure that's a mannequin. So
right.
Some of it he was not exposed to.
So maybe they just pulled him out and he doesn't even really, or he didn't know. He probably knows now, obviously.
That kid, he looks like 6 or 7.
Yeah. So I admit I was traumatized on his behalf. I just really thought that was pretty dark. So even just that storyline alone would have been a tough thing, I think, to for audiences to deal with. Even we watch this stuff all the time, and I totally forgot about that part, I guess. And then when it happened, I was like, wait, oh my gosh, I must have blocked this out. So yeah, that was pretty dark. And there's obviously, it's an exploitation films, and as you said, many people would go to see this to see violence and boobs and the exploitation of women, and just, they have the costume thing, which are very revealing and exploitative. There's like, even, I don't know if you noticed it, but one of the deputies who is just, I think, listed as the sexy deputy,
or like hot deputy, or something
whatever.
Like,
but like her uniform is for whatever reason ripped up to her like bra line, so you can see her abs. Like there's like, and yes, that's part of these films, but
the
in
people
terms
who survive of the group who gets from the barbecue house to the military base, it's basically by the end old men
and
like
hot
the saxophone
women.
Player and hot young women.
Yep. And then the crazy twin and the crazy twin babysitters, like
unnecessary. I mean, they were supposed to be, I think, comic relief and like sort of harmless, threatening, except that they're smashing shovels into the car seat window where Tony Block is sitting, and I'm like, all right, that's like violence against children, effectively separated by a car window, but
yeah,
I don't know how I feel about that either. And they weren't funny enough to really add something. At the end, they were just another set of bared midriffs getting into the helicopter. Like that was their role. And
right.
That was not enough to offset what they brought to the film, which was not very much.
Well, they were related to Robert Rodriguez's ex-wife, I believe, or something like that, and maybe that's why they were in it. But then they also went on to appear in Machete, which I never saw, but they do have the trailer for this at the beginning of this film, which was supposed to be a fake trailer, and I guess they actually went on to do the film in 2010. And then there was a sequel called Machete Kills. Did you see either of those films?
No, I did not.
And those feature Danny Trejo, who is awesome. So, but in any case, they pretty much, those two actresses, Electra and Elise Avalon, appear basically in these films, and that's it. And I don't know, maybe that was just the idea that they were supposed to be, it's supposed to be like that kind of relief, but I don't think they did it very successfully.
There wasn't much there.
No. Anyway, so, but you know, all these themes throughout this, if we're looking at this as a true zombie film, the basic premise is that there's biochemical weapons that are being studied.
Yeah, and it's a mixture of stuff. It's like airborne gas,
right?
Which is why all those people start coming into the emergency room with the weird bumps on their face. So it's airborne, and there is a bite component, or there isn't, because also Tom Savini gets bitten and doesn't turn.
Right, that was weird. And, you know, and they're definitely, in terms of the makeup, they're definitely pulling from Toxic Avenger type visuals, like that sort of, honestly, just truly disgusting, sort of like pus bubble filled face things, which really just gets its complete overload when they finally have Bruce Willis at the end, just transforming. And I don't even know that was him in the final round. Cannot tell. That's how bad it is. But
and he just kind of stands there and like waves his giant arm.
Yeah,
like he doesn't do anything.
No.
He's not like a bad boss. He's not like the end boss.
Just, yeah. And then, you know, it's also a multitude of things. So it's basically like they have every infection ever known to man. And then, you know, it's interesting because it's like the Naveen Andrews character, who's the doctor, the scientist, supposedly that's going to help them find a cure, gets taken out. And they just have this section of this population that's immune somehow, and going off to Mexico to start some really amazing colony with a former strip club manager and a sax player. So I don't know. There's definitely, I mean, we're not supposed to take it seriously, but there is definitely things about this that I think also contributed to it not being as successful as it might have been. You know, because what I couldn't help thinking about was Zombieland, or Dawn of the Dead, which are also kind of like, there's levels of cheesiness. There's like a little bit of like tongue-in-cheek stuff with it.
Dawn of the Dead is dead serious compared to this, and
No,
Zombieland has the humor, but it doesn't have the camp.
Right, but what I'm saying is that, you know, like, if you're being a little bit self-reverential, which both of those films are, there's a way to do it. So I don't know. Like, I just felt like this just was trying to do it and missed. So, but I do remember watching it and being like, all right, the level of cheesiness, the level of like effort that it took to get there, I can appreciate that. But especially some of those storylines just didn't sit with me very well.
Did you like the line where Ray puts his hand on Cherry's stomach at the end and says, "There's gross. Two of you. I never miss."
No. Gross. Missing real, I guess.
I mean, they had the sex scene right before.
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, you kind of knew that was coming. I don't know that you necessarily needed that, but I think they felt like they had to do it. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
Oh, it was absurd. Yeah, just like, oh, come on. But then that's what they were going for.
Yeah,
that's exactly what they wanted. So, what did you think about? So, Cherry's leg is like the most iconic thing about this movie. That was what I recognized about it from the promotional stuff that I had seen when it was coming out. It's pretty cool. Like the fact that they have zombies rip her leg off in Act 1. And by Act 3, she has a machine gun leg. And by like post Act 3, the epilogue, she has a minigun leg.
Yeah.
All of this is pretty cool. I kind of like it. So I did enjoy that. But how did you feel about it?
I loved it. I mean, that was honestly like part of me felt like if some of this could have been retooled a little bit, this would have been a lot more successful. I loved that part of it. I loved the whole evolution. Her leg gets ripped off, and instead of making this like a liability, she becomes the most powerful character. Um, and just even from but they started out really well where she's walking with the first leg that Ray makes for her, the wooden leg, and they're just the comic relief, and she's an amazing actress to pull this off because that could not have been easy. This whole thing, I mean, apparently they had to do an enormous amount of editing and to try to like comp this in, but she's still having to walk as if she's got this crazy leg, right?
Yeah.
So I just felt like she did an incredible job with that, and the ridiculousness of it was awesome. The machine gun leg, total badass. Loved it.
It's over the top. It's crazy, but it does work for this film. It's one of the things that works the best, I think.
There's also that chopper scene. What did you think about that?
That's perfect. Yeah, exactly. That's the way to. Although, like, why is it Skip who does this?
Right.
Why did they make Skip like a hero at the end?
Right. He's never been a hero. Even like getting on the plane, or on the chopper, he's not a hero.
Yeah.
Him
and the crazy babysitter twins are like, yeah, the badasses who saved the day in a way.
Yeah.
But really, it's Ray and Cherry who saved the day.
Yep.
So also in this was Jeff Fahey of Lawnmower Man fame, and he was also in the trailer for Machete. Right, he was like the baddie.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I also like him, and I liked the back and forth between him and Michael Bihn's character.
Yeah, that was cute.
The whole barbecue sauce subplot, I guess, if you want to call it that. It was kind of that was like an interesting little running joke that I thought was kind of fun about this.
I did like that, and the fact that they don't really reveal that they're brothers for a long time until the very end. The other thing I would say, you know what? Number one reason this movie failed, you killed the dog, man. Don't ever do that. It's just a bad idea.
Weird way too.
What a strange way to kill him too. It's terrible. You don't ever kill the dog. That's just a bad way to go.
Apparently, this film had decent critical response. It's just I think people were not in. You're saying like, oh, these were bad things about the movie that made it so that people didn't want to go see it. I feel like people don't want to go to the movies and pay whatever it was in 2007, probably still like $20 or $30 to go to the movies to see a B movie.
Right.
That to me is.
And also, I mean, the other thing I would say is that I do think that this has gotten some, because now it's on, you can look at it on Amazon, whatever, but streaming and stuff was just not there at this point in time. So 2007, you have to have the release and whatever. And I just don't think that, I think probably were it released now, or like, I think it would have had a very different reception and probably would have been a lot more successful.
Like direct to streaming. Or, like Sci-Fi was doing direct to their TV channel. With their B movies that are intentional are released on TV, not in theater. And they, they're like, yeah, we do great with these, and they sell DVDs or whatever. And that's where the market, I think, for something like this is in home video, as they used to call it.
Right. And it did, I mean, look, when it was released on DVD, it did get a better reception, and it did have, like, it was a lot more successful. So, the practical effects, the practical makeup, all of that stuff are things that people really like. And it had that retro feel. So I think that I definitely feel as if this had happened later, it probably would have gotten more legs than it did at the time. So I don't know. That's storylines aside. I think it's like an enormous amount of pulp that people would be into if they were into this kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I'm not better off for having seen it, but it's out there. So
right. I mean, the other thing is that long film, right? And I do think they might have done better to edit it down a little more.
Yeah.
And people definitely have a shorter span of attention in general. So even if you look at the stuff that we've watched, I mean, I don't think you see like, especially like horror films. I don't know that you see anything much over like an hour and 15, maybe an hour and 20 sometimes. So there's that too. So I also think that hurt it a little bit, but.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, there's a lot of things to like. The things I disliked, I was reminded of, I must have blocked out. But, you know, I get what they were trying to do, and I like the idea of this kind of a project. So, you know, I'm not going to give it a thumbs down. I'm not going to give it like total thumbs up, but I still think it's one of those things worth watching. As long as you can get around some of the uncomfortable like storylines and grossness of the effects.
Fair enough.
What's your final?
I have to give it a thumbs down.
Okay.
But yeah, I respect your opinion.
I kind of feel that like people who are into like the 70s films and things like that, and it is just a smaller audience. It's a niche audience. So I get why it would be hard for a huge group of people to find this and really love it.
So that's about all we have to say about Planet Terror. Next time, tonight is actually, we're recording this on June 2nd. Tonight is the fifth season premiere of Fear the Walking Dead, and in about 2 weeks, The Dead Don't Die is going to come out. So we will be covering both of those when we can, but next week we're actually going to review Zombie, with an I. I think, Italian
It is Italian.
zombie film from a while back, like early 80s, I think. So Zombie was 1978. Original title was Dawn of the Dead. Whoops. So then there's three of them. Zombie came out in 78. Zombie 2 came out in 79. So they were slamming these things out. And then Zombie 3 was 88. So they took a little break. But yeah, so we're going to talk about the 1978 film Zombie next time we get together. So thank you for listening to the Planet Terror recap. If you have any insight that you want to share, give us a holler on reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter @reanimatedpcast, or on our show notes, which are at reanimatedpodcast.com.
You're so good at that.
Just trips off the tongue.
So good. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. Until next time, ciao.
All right. Bye-bye.